AITA for cutting off my brother after he got my wife pregnant and lost his $2 million inheritance? My younger brother, Dylan, always harbored a deep grudge against me. And if you think it stemmed from jealousy, you are wrong. He was the favorite child, not me. He had no reason to be envious. To give you some context, our mom always let Dylan get away with everything. He was the golden child of the family. She made his meals, did his laundry, and even asked me to help him with his homework. I was expected to help him simply because we were family, but I never received the same attention. I had accepted this situation because I was quite independent. Maybe it was partly my fault. I always met his needs without ever expecting anything in return. He never helped me when I needed it and only came to me when he wanted something. While I was a quiet, introverted kid who loved studying and keeping to myself, he was loud and rough, just like our dad. I also tend to be blunt without sugarcoating my words. I think my mom eventually developed a negative opinion of me because of this bluntness. This favoritism made Dylan the family favorite, and it did not bother me too much growing up. But things got worse when he started bullying me and making fun of me because I was different. He mocked my height and the fact that I wore glasses. He would sneak into my room, read my journal, and then go complain to my mom about what I wrote in it. When I yelled at him and complained to our parents about his invasion of my privacy, they laughed it off, saying it was no big deal. He did much worse. He almost broke my glasses and put disgusting things in my food. Once, he even put small pebbles in my cereal, but fortunately, I saw them before they damaged my teeth. When I told my mom about it, she simply said that was how brothers bonded. During every argument, Dylan used my insecurities to insult me. We went to the same high school, so he knew I was being bullied by some students. Instead of supporting me, he sided with them, calling me ugly or a hairy monkey. And he encouraged others to hit me, saying I was just a loser. Once, after an argument over something insignificant, he told me to kill myself. Most of these insults did not get to me, but that one hurt me deeply because I was going through a tough time mentally. I am doing much better today, but hearing that from my own brother was devastating. My dad was often at work, and my mom did not seem to care. She even scolded me once, saying it was my fault for annoying him. Things escalated over time. In high school, a shocking event occurred. Dylan tried to light my hair on fire with a lighter. Unbelievably, our mom defended him, saying he was just showing off. Fortunately, my dad finally supported me and highlighted the gravity of the situation. He even threatened to call the police. This was a shock for Dylan, who had never faced real consequences before. My dad told him clearly that enough was enough, that he needed to start respecting his older brother. Afterward, he came to talk to me in my room. I did not expect his support because he always said that he and Dylan were very similar, which was true. He confessed to me that he had hoped for years that Dylan would mature, but he now realized he had become a real bully. Hearing this from him was incredibly comforting. I was on the verge of tears. I told him everything. The bullying, the harassment at school, everything. He was shocked by all that I had endured. The next day, he spoke to the principal so the bullies would be warned they faced severe consequences if they continued. That evening, he signed me up for self-defense classes at a local gym, saying I needed to learn to defend myself against life's bullies. I admit that a studious kid like me learning to fight was a bit out of character, but I was very determined. I managed my schedule well between studying and training, and those classes transformed my physique and my confidence. One day, Dylan started his nonsense again. He stole the money I had saved up by doing chores around the neighborhood. He had sneaked into my room and taken it. I caught him right before he left with his friends. I asked him to give my money back, but he mocked me, saying all I knew how to do was run and cry to Dad. I do not know what came over me, but I hit him right in the face. He was shocked and fell backward, and I took my money back from his pocket before pushing him away. He started crying loudly. It was almost comical. My mom immediately came out to see what was happening. Upon learning that I had fought with him, she reprimanded me, saying I needed to be a role model for Dylan, who, of course, gloated seeing me get scolded. She complained to my dad about my behavior, saying I needed to be set straight. My dad asked us in a serious tone to explain ourselves. I told him how Dylan had stolen my hard-earned money, and Dylan tried to justify himself by saying he needed it for a date and that, as a brother, I should help him. But my dad told him he was lucky I had settled for just hitting him because anyone else would have called the police. He told him he had no right to take other people's belongings without their permission. Dylan did not appreciate this and threw a tantrum, probably hoping our mom would defend him. But my dad stood firm. Seeing that he would not be supported, Dylan screamed that he hated me and locked himself in his room. After this incident, he started to distance himself. He had finally understood that he could no longer mistreat me with impunity, and even Dad was no longer putting up with his tantrums. For the first time in a long while, I felt like his equal. Even though he could no longer hurt me physically, he continued his verbal insults when our parents were not around. His behavior deteriorated further as he grew older, becoming increasingly angry. If I asked him a question, he would ignore me or mutter insults like nerd or loser. And if he had something to say to me, he went through our mom instead of talking to me directly. When I asked her why Dylan could not speak to me, she told me to be understanding. I did not know if it was adolescence or genuine hatred. Little by little, these remarks became unbearable, and I dreamed of moving far away from him. I asked my mom several times to organize a discussion between us to ease the tension, but she always refused, saying she did not want to get involved. When I asked her why Dylan acted this way toward me, she dodged the question. Finally, I left home to attend my dream college, having earned a scholarship thanks to my excellent grades. My dad threw a party to celebrate, and even my mom seemed proud. But Dylan remained distant and barely acknowledged my success. The day I left for college was a mix of excitement for the future and relief at leaving such a toxic environment. The first few months at college were truly liberating. I made new friends. I loved my classes, and I finally started building a life away from the oppressive atmosphere of my childhood. The constant fear of Dylan's verbal attacks dissipated, bringing me an unprecedented sense of peace. During my sophomore year of college, I met my wife, Sarah, at a student party organized by a friend, and we clicked right away. Coming from a religious family, having children out of wedlock was frowned upon. However, when we found out she was pregnant during our senior year, we decided to get married right after graduation. Our wedding was a modest ceremony, but filled with joy. Our parents were happy for us, and we enjoyed the celebration. At that time, I sincerely believed that Sarah was the love of my life. I had always envisioned a monogamous relationship, one woman with whom to share my life and my home. Despite the interest other women showed in me over the years, I never gave in to temptation because I was truly fulfilled in my marriage. Sarah was the woman of my dreams, and I never wanted to hurt her. But I eventually discovered 2 instances of infidelity in our marriage. The first was an on-and-off relationship with a married coworker that spanned several years. The second was a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend during a visit to her family. Some might think I was naive, and in hindsight, I cannot entirely disagree with them. Every time we temporarily separated, I chose to forgive her. I did not want to raise our child in a broken home, and I believed we could overcome these trials. The affair with her coworker happened when we were young, and I chalked it up to youthful mistakes and a lack of judgment. For a while, things seemed to improve. Even though I could no longer trust her completely, I did my best to put my doubts aside, knowing that if I chose to forgive, I genuinely had to work toward a fresh start. It had been 4 years since her second betrayal, and I felt confident in my decision to give her another chance. Sarah seemed to have changed, and we were genuinely happy, planning our family's future. However, 3 months ago, my world collapsed again when she confessed to having a long-term affair and suggested that our son might not be mine. Those words hit me like a monumental slap in the face. A mix of shock, betrayal, and disbelief overwhelmed me. I struggled to grasp the magnitude of her confession. Stunned, I managed to ask her why she had kept such a secret and how she could do something so destructive. Her reaction was cold and indifferent, as if she were detached from the pain she was causing. Her vague answers only raised more questions. It was a surreal and painful moment, confronted with broken trust and uncertainty about my own family. I kept pressing for the truth because I deserved to know who the father of the child I had raised since birth was. She finally admitted it was Dylan. My eyes widened in sheer disbelief. I demanded explanations from Sarah. She told me that she and Dylan had become friends when I introduced her to my family, and she stayed at our house from Thanksgiving to New Year's. Dylan, who was usually cold toward me, had been warm and polite to her, which had reassured me. I did not want Sarah to feel unwelcome. She wanted to be accepted by my family. So, She spent a lot of time with my mom. She had noticed the tension between Dylan and me and asked me about it. I confided in her about our strained relationship, explaining that it was unlikely we would ever repair it due to those unresolved grudges. Sarah understood but started including Dylan in our outings, hoping it might bring us closer. Whenever we planned to watch a movie, she invited Dylan, and we watched whatever he chose. During that time, Dylan and I exchanged a few words, which was progress compared to his usual silence. I remember Sarah and Dylan spending time together playing video games, but I had never worried about it. Sarah confessed to me that one day Dylan had opened up to her about his struggles and a recent breakup. Feeling vulnerable, he formed a friendship with her. She told me he would lightly flirt with her when I was not around, and then things escalated into an inappropriate relationship. The thought of my wife betraying me with my own brother made me sick to my stomach. Sarah admitted she felt guilty after she left, which coincided with her sudden decision to go home instead of spending New Year's with me. I had tried to convince her to stay, but she was determined to leave. When we reunited at college, she was her usual smiling self, so I suspected nothing. 2 weeks later, we found out she was pregnant. Sarah admitted she did not know if the child was mine or Dylan's. And since there was no way to prove it at the time, she had chosen to stay with me, knowing I was the more reliable brother. That is why we got married. My world was falling apart. The son I loved might not even be mine. I asked Sarah if she had continued seeing Dylan, and she slowly nodded. She confessed that they had always stayed in touch because of their strong attraction. They would meet secretly, lying to me by saying she was working overtime. She admitted that half of her business trips were actually getaways with him. I asked her why she married me if she wanted to be with my brother, and Sarah told me she did not want to be the one to break up our marriage. She saw me as a wonderful father to our son and had decided to stay. According to her, she had made a mistake and did not know how to stop. I told her I was glad she told me the truth, but that I was packing my bags and leaving. She started crying, begging for forgiveness, expecting me to yell. Instead, I calmly gathered my things. Sarah insisted that if I loved her, I should fight for her, and that all marriages go through mistakes. When she realized I would not react, she changed her tune, saying our son would suffer from the divorce, and that a child should not grow up in a broken home. I reminded her that I might not even be the father, which made her cry harder, accusing me of being cruel. She seemed convinced that nothing could make me leave the marriage. Maybe it was partly my fault for letting some things slide in the past. Even though I loved her, that feeling probably stemmed from the fact that I thought we had a child together and that we had been together since college. Sarah kept claiming it was not too late to fix things, but I could not believe it anymore. The trust was irreparably shattered, and her words rang hollow. Even if I forgave her, I could never forget that she had betrayed me with my brother. I always believed in forgiving mistakes because we are all imperfect. But here, she had crossed an unacceptable line. I left her crying on the doorstep and went to a hotel. The next day, I went to my parents' house and revealed the whole truth about my wife's affair with Dylan, explaining that they had been seeing each other secretly for years. The shock on their faces was obvious. True to form, my mom initially tried to defend Dylan, claiming her son would never do such a thing to his own brother. Determined to expose the truth, I asked my parents to stay silent while I called Dylan in front of them. I told them to say nothing so Dylan would think it was a private conversation. When he answered, I confronted him about the affair. At first, he fiercely denied it, refusing to take any responsibility. But when I told him Sarah had confessed everything, he started calling her an immoral person. He claimed it was not his fault if women were attracted to him, and that he was the more handsome of the two brothers. I firmly replied that I was going to reveal everything. When Dylan mocked me, claiming no one would believe me because he was the golden child, I sneered at his arrogance and thanked him for confirming the truth, knowing our parents had heard everything. Dylan fell silent, then began to stammer, trying to justify himself and save his image. My mom, still in shock, demanded explanations. He mumbled pathetic excuses, blaming everyone but himself and desperately trying to shift the blame onto Sarah. I saw my mom, once so protective of her favorite son, now disappointed and angry. In that tense moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. For years, I had endured Dylan's torment. Now, the truth was out in the open, and the roles were reversed. It was Dylan who found himself exposed, his actions laid bare. As his words faltered, my dad, who was usually reserved, could not hide his disappointment. He asked me to hand him the phone and started talking to Dylan. "Dylan," he said, his voice full of sorrow, "what you did is not just a betrayal of your brother, but a betrayal of this family. You had an affair with your brother's wife and continued this relationship even after they were married. Your actions have severe consequences and have irreparably broken the trust we had in you. I raised you both to respect family, loyalty, and decency. What you have shown today goes against everything I tried to instill in you." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into Dylan's conscience. "Your disregard for your brother's feelings and your lack of respect for his marriage are unacceptable. You did not just hurt him, you also tore apart the bonds that held our family together. Your mother and I bear some responsibility for what you have become, but we will no longer tolerate this behavior. Starting today, you are cut off from the college fund I set aside for you. You will have to figure out how to pay your college tuition yourself. I will no longer fund your lifestyle either. You think having an affair with a married woman makes you a man? Let's see how you manage without my money." Throughout this, I remained calm. Although I initially wanted to scream at Dylan, seeing my dad punish him was the best vindication. I had revealed his true nature, and it was clear he had underestimated the consequences. My mom, despite Dylan's persistent protests, continued to try to defend him, but my dad quickly ended the call, cutting short Dylan's attempts to justify himself. After that, my mom came over to me and hugged me. It had been a long time since we had shared such a moment, but in that embrace, there was an unspoken understanding and support amid all this family chaos. She apologized for not believing me all those years. When I was 14, I never would have imagined experiencing such a moment, finally being believed and embraced by my mom. Afterward, my dad helped me find a good lawyer to handle the divorce. Sarah and her lawyer tried to fight dirty, demanding alimony because I earned more than her, but her infidelity played heavily in my favor. We also did a DNA paternity test, and it was confirmed that Dylan was indeed the father of the child. The news was incredibly painful, even worse than Sarah's betrayal. I was furious that the son I had loved and raised was not mine, but I decided to stay strong. Sarah begged me to keep seeing my son, claiming he should not be punished for this situation, but I could not bear it. He reminded me too much of Dylan, and I could not handle that reminder. Once the divorce was finalized, an immense sense of freedom washed over me as I moved into my own bachelor apartment. It felt surreal to live alone because I had married very young and had never had the chance to live completely independently. But my self-reliant nature allowed me to adapt quickly, and I soon began to fully enjoy my new lifestyle. A few weeks ago, my dad called to tell me he was planning to change his will because he did not want to leave anything to Dylan. My dad is extremely stubborn, and once he decides to cut someone out of his life, he sticks to it. Dylan tried to reconnect with our parents and even showed up at their door, begging for their forgiveness, but they refused to let him in. Even my mom, who often gave in to his whims, seemed to have drawn a line, though it must have been particularly difficult for her. Dylan never sent me any messages to apologize for what he had done, which clearly shows he regrets nothing. He was just angry about being cut off financially by our parents. My dad told me he intended to leave his entire inheritance to me to ensure Dylan could never contest it. He would leave him only a symbolic $1. My eyes widened upon hearing this because my dad had worked hard his whole life. Including his assets, retirement fund, and life insurance, the total was close to $2 million. The only condition in the will was that if my dad passed away before my mom, she could continue living in their house, even if I became the legal owner. That did not bother me because I wanted to take care of my mom in her final days. Somehow, Dylan found out about this, and unable to reach our parents, he called me yesterday to try to make amends. He explained that he was struggling in college and that since Sarah had learned the truth about the child's paternity, she was demanding child support from him. He told me he was flat broke, looking for a part-time job, but could not find anything. He begged me to talk to our family so we could start from scratch because he really needed my help. I burst out laughing and told him I was done with him. I reminded him that he should have thought about the consequences before having an affair with my wife and getting her pregnant. Dylan retorted that I was not being fair and that Sarah was also at fault. I agreed with him on that point. I reminded him that I had left her and that she was now his responsibility. He should not call me to complain about her or the child, because these were the consequences of his own actions. Dylan started raising his voice, but I cut him off, reminding him that he was no longer the golden child of the family, but the black sheep who had betrayed his own brother. At that moment, Dylan started crying, telling me that everyone, including our grandparents and relatives, had turned against him. And even if that were true, it was no longer my problem. I told him we were done and that he should never call me again, as I no longer considered him my brother. Since then, I often think back to that conversation. Despite all my hatred for my brother, I had never heard him cry, at least not since our childhood. I am not going to lie. It hurt me a little to see him so distraught. So, I guess I am here to ask if I should talk to my parents about it, or if I would be a jerk for doing nothing. Update 1. Hello everyone. Many of you have asked me why I am no longer in contact with my son Logan, and some have even called me cruel. I need to explain that I am not comfortable with the idea of raising another man's child. This is not a typical stepson situation. I was led to believe Logan was my son only to discover later that he is actually my brother Dylan's. Naturally, this revelation hurt me deeply, and I cried for days. The main reason I no longer want contact with Logan is that I no longer want Sarah in my life. If I remain tied to her child, she will find a way to come back into my life, and I need my peace. You might think I am cruel or selfish, but I can no longer see him, at least not for a very long time. Update 2. Most of you correctly guessed that it was my mom who informed Dylan about the change in my dad's will, which prompted Dylan to call me as a last resort to try to fix things. I confronted her in front of my dad, and she broke down, saying I had punished Dylan enough and that he had learned his lesson from all this. My dad then firmly told my mom that if she thought what Dylan did was forgivable, then he could no longer stay married to her, because he could never forgive such a betrayal. That threat was enough to silence my mom. My dad was very clear. If she got back in touch with Dylan and we caught her, she would have to pack her bags and leave. As I mentioned, my dad is very stubborn. I hope my mom will learn a lesson from her mistakes. Update 3. Hi. It has been 5 months since my last update. My relationship with my parents has improved over the past few months. My dad and I play golf every weekend, and he treats me more like a buddy than a son. Even though my mom is nostalgic for Dylan, she has stayed away from him. The last time I heard about Dylan was from my cousin, who told me that Dylan was asking everyone for money and ultimately had to drop out of college because he could no longer pay the tuition. He and Sarah are living together, and he has a part-time job as a mechanic. Apparently, they are raising Logan together, which is a good thing, I guess. I never talk about Dylan with my parents, and they do not bring him up either. For those wondering, I am doing pretty well. I got promoted at work 2 months ago, so my salary has increased significantly. I am not seeing anyone right now because I feel I still need time and space to heal. I am in therapy, so we will see how it goes. Comment. I want to thank you for watching this story with an open heart. One thing it made me reflect on is the importance of protecting your own peace. You deserve to set healthy boundaries with people who repeatedly hurt you. True healing often begins the moment you decide to stop accepting mistreatment. Taking responsibility for your happiness is difficult, but incredibly empowering. Kindness toward others should never mean abandoning kindness toward yourself. Learning to choose calm over continued pain is a sign of real strength. I hope this encourages you to examine the relationships in your own life. Remember that you have the right to walk away from what no longer serves you. Putting yourself first isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.